Welcome back to Dino's Garage for the VFR800. Now, as we know, this is the 2003 V-Tec VFR. Today we're going to be taking off the rear wheel. The reason I want to do that, and I'll show you up close in a second, once we undo these full studs, we can take the rear wheel off. I can then get in and clean all behind on this lovely single side rear swing arm, and basically get in, clean all of that alloy up. It's much more accessible once I remove the wheel, and also at the same time we're going to be tightening the chain, and I'll show you how easy that is on a VFR. Any of the VFRs with the single side swing arm with the concentric hub, basically you loosen off a clamp bolt and then you turn a small serrated disc which basically turns and moves the wheel either further back or further forward, which obviously tightens or loosens the chain. So let's undo these full studs, get the rear wheel off, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's crack on. So with the bike in first gear, as we can see, the wheel does move slightly, so we know the weight is on the centre stand, not on the rear wheel. Bike's in first gear, 19mm socket. I should then be able to undo this. Now if they're too tight I might have to get a bigger bar out, but that does undo. So that's them all loosened off. Now I can just like a car, wheel nuts are virtually exactly the same as a conventional car. All nuts on here. Most cars probably have 5, and a locking nut. No locking nut on here, but I guess you can buy one. So that's the full off, and it is literally as simple as that to remove the wheel. So there we go, that's our rear brake caliper, the hub, the disc. And now we can see right into here, and I can get in and really clean all of this properly. So much difference in the access I've got now. I can see the shock, I can clean the shock, I can see the bottom of the shock with the plate and the linkage underneath there. That needs a really good clean. It's all covered in dust and muck, probably hasn't been cleaned for quite a long time. So I'll zoom in, show you what it looks like in there, and then you'll see why I want to give it a good clean. So there we go, as you can see, that is our rear swing arm. All of the gunk that flicks off the chain comes down there, flicks off there, pretty much goes everywhere. As I said, rear brake caliper, disc, and there we go. And such good accessibility. There's your rear shock, and there's the linkage under the shock, but it really is filthy, dusty, covered in muck and gunk under there. So let's get a bucket, let's get on and clean this, and then we can go back to sorting that chain and the hub and tension on the chain. So I've already gone in and cleaned this linkage here, and we can see this bit's already shiny, and it wasn't shiny before, but now I'm going to be going along here with WD-40. Now you can see I've already laid out some cardboard, because when I start spraying all of this with WD-40 it's going to go straight down onto the tarmac surface, and I don't want that tarmac surface covered in WD-40 and all the gunk that runs off of here. So bit of cardboard down obviously protects the whole lot. So I'll crack on with that now. So that is it all basically cleaned off with WD-40, then with hot water and a brush. Now you can probably just make out here that there's some spotting. Now unfortunately all of this is good because it's been protected by the grease of the chain, but here it's never been cleaned, and so what's happened is this is a little bit of corrosion into the actual finish of the rear swing arm. So I'm going to lightly rub this with a bit of auto sole polish and a bit of fine wire wool, just to see if I can remove that spotting. Let's see if that works now. So this is the area I'm talking about. Now you can see the spotting here, and when the wheel's on you can see this, but it's hard to access to physically get in and clean. So with this auto sole, just a simple auto sole polish and fine wire wool, and it is going to slightly take off the surface of what's protecting this area, but by the same token it should remove this black spotting to some degree, which is essentially where salts got into the actual alloy and began to break through. Because this has probably been spray painted alloy, just like our front lower legs. Just gently, nothing too harsh. You should find that once I rub that with this cloth, it is better. So you can see straight away it is better, but basically the black spots are the alloy exposed underneath. To really clean these black spots you need to polish them. If I polish them too hard, I'm in effect taking away some of the protective layer around those black spots. I'll do it a little bit more with the auto sole wire wool, but I can't go too much. Unfortunately, it's already a little bit too late. Someone should have cleaned it a long time ago when they went out, probably in the winter on salty days, salt on the road, and what they didn't do is come back and clean it properly, and then that salt's just left to eat its way into your nice paintwork and alloy. Loads better already, I think you'll agree. Not perfect, but it is better. Thanks for that. I'm realising that this little heat shield's in the way. Now it's just held on by one Allen key bolt here, and then it sort of drops into a little lug at the back there, so it goes in and then bolts into place. Now what I am going to do is spray a bit of WD-40 in there first, because there's every chance that that is rusted, or got dirt and stuff on the back of it. It'll be too tight. As I go to undo it, it'll bend and maybe cause some damage to the actual thing that this bolt's bolted into, that's encapsulated on the back of the exhaust. So a bit of WD-40, then I'll work that loose, then I can take that off, then I can clean that pipe nicely without having the heat shield in the way. So I've already cracked this off. Came undone really easily actually, which is nice. So what should happen is that should just lift off and come out the way. So there we go. As I say, it's got these two tabs here and one that goes into the exhaust, encapsulated part on the exhaust. So nice and easy. Now I can really clean that very well, and even clean this without it being on there, although technically that's probably easy to clean and easier to clean whilst on there, just because it's not moving about. So here is how it goes. I wanted to clean this exhaust pipe. I cleaned that exhaust pipe, but to clean it properly I took that guard off, and then I realised that the heat shield that's here, that these foot pegs and the rear brake lever bolts through into the exhaust, I realised the heat shield wasn't great. Someone had previously painted it, but it wasn't brilliant and it was getting a bit rusty. So I took the heat shield off, I rubbed the heat shield down, and I spray painted the heat shield in a high temperature satin matte sort of black paint. Then I saw these exhaust pipes were all rusty looking, so I've rubbed them down a bit with wire wool and then washed them down, and I've sprayed them with high temperature paint, just so when things are on from different angles it actually looks pretty nice in there and not rusty pipes. So you can see we got black pipes running down to the standard, to the colour underneath here. This has all been cleaned up with wire wool and auto solve, so that's come up really nice because that will be all pretty visible from, you know, in there. So yeah, as I say, one thing leads to another. So now I'm going to put the heat shield back in, and I'll show you that in a second once it's in place in there. Then just so you know as well, you might think, right, it's one bolt there, but actually it's one bolt there and then another 2 bolts that the side pegs bolt to. Don't try and undo them bolts and think I can't get a spanner behind. Just undo the main bolts of the foot peg so it comes out. Once you've undone this one, then you can manipulate it and get your spanner or socket or something behind, hold the nut in place, then undo with the Allen keys. It's a lot easier undoing these main bolts and tilting that out first to then get that heat shield plate out. It's a bit awkward because it tucks right up underneath and it's awkward to get out, and it will probably be awkward to get in, and I'll probably scratch some paint trying to get it in, which will be very frustrating and annoying, but hopefully it's just the top part that goes right up underneath here, because it's still shielding the exhaust up underneath where there's any obviously plastics and things. So yeah, as I say, one thing leads to another. So I'm going to get that all put back on in place, and then eventually we'll have a look at tightening that chain eventually. Right, let's get on. And so there we go, that is everything back in place. That's the heat shield that's been spray painted with the high temperature paint. Looks really nice and neat now, no rusty sort of edges around it. It's not perfection because it was already beginning to rust. Really it would have needed a brand new piece of metal or completely rubbing down, and yeah, then it gets to the point where the filler was needed. But really looks a lot neater now. I've cleaned up a little bit in here, just fussy little bits that I've seen. All of this has been polished, that pipe's all been polished, and I'll show you behind there now where it's all black. But yeah, happy with that now, neated up as best it can be, really, to some degree. Let's have a look behind it. So as you can see behind, this pipe's all been polished up now, and the pipes behind it here are now black. I think you can just make that out the way the camera's exposing the brightness. And as we know, that bit's already been cleaned up and is almost spotless. But overall, you know, that back end is looking a lot cleaner, a lot more sorted. Just need to now tighten that chain and get that rear wheel on. And I'm not going to lie to you, pretty knackered. Lappy. Now here we have this nut, so we need to undo this. This basically cramps down the 2 halves, if you like, as a clamp. So when we undo this, this split here becomes looser. Then we can go into this here, which is basically a castellated adjuster, a bit like the top of a shock absorber, and then you tap it one way or the other and it will turn and pull the wheel backwards to make it tighter, or go forwards to make it looser. So in our case we want to undo this and then knock this castellation, and then we should then move that hub so it tightens up, but I'll show you it. Right, so we have a 17mm on there. It should be tight. Now it is very tight. So I'm going to go and get a longer, bigger, so I can get more leverage on that. There we go. So don't break your back trying to do things. Find something that is bigger, longer, give you more leverage. So that is that undone. Let's just see. Yeah, so that's loose. So in here we have the castellations. Now you should have in a Honda VFR toolkit an actual proper C-spanner that you can put in there and then turn it round or bring it back up again. So I'm going to, in this case, use a blunt-ended screwdriver, not a sharp one, but a very blunt-ended one. Not quite the correct thing to do, but a rubber hammer, and then just tap that gently and see whether or not that is tightening or loosening. So I think that is loosening, going clockwise. Let's just tap it the other way and see whether going anti-clockwise we are getting tighter. So yeah, that is definitely tighter. Okay, I think I know what it is with this particular bike that I've recently bought. It's had a new chain and sprockets put on. Now what they actually could have done with is loosening the hub all the way back so it was forward, dropping a link out of here, and then as the chain got older and a little bit stretched, they could then bring the hub by knocking this anti-clockwise back slightly to tighten up. Now in fact what they have done is they've left the link in, not removed an extra link, and the hub is actually at its furthest point back already. Hence why when I keep tapping this, it stops there, and that is at its tightest point. And then as I wiggle the chain, it's actually loosening off a little bit. So actually what I'm going to do is tighten this up just enough to bite it, set it right, and then we're all good. But that's what was happening, is every time I tap this, got the chain to where I thought it was right, when I wiggled the chain, the hub was actually slightly rotating back the other way. So that's just pinching slightly now, but it shouldn't loosen off. Let's check that chain. Yeah, it's too tight there now. There's a point where it's too tight. So I now know I can just nick this off slightly, not too much, just enough to give some tension. Just tap this very slowly. Doesn't loosen, I know that just needs another little. I think I just had it that bit too loose before. There, I can see it moving now. So let's just go through. It's very loose there, tightens up a bit there, loosens up. It's quite tight there. It's bizarre. It's really quite tight there, and then as you can see it gets loose again, which is a bit strange. But I think in general that's about it. I will inspect that chain and make sure I'm happy with it. Right, so this needs to be set to 74 Newton meters, which is 54.5 foot-pounds. And just by the way, the 4 studs that go on here are 104 Newton meters, which is around 76 foot-pounds. This is in foot-pounds, so as I say, I'm going to set this back to 55, and I wouldn't be surprised if I've already tightened it up to that point. 55 foot-pounds. Yeah, had a little way to go, but there we go. I was almost spot on. So there we go, that's the chain done, tightened, and it might look a little bit slack there, but as we come round, it does tighten there, so I can't have it so tight. And don't forget that once you're under compression on the swing arm, you do in effect tighten the chain. As your hip bumps, the chain tightens. Now I have just polished up the heads of all of these wheel nuts because they are very grubby. Didn't bother with these bits here, but at least the hex headed part I've polished. Now they obviously sit quite deep within these recesses. Now what bugs me a little bit is how filthy and dirty these recesses are. I've just gone in with some WD-40 in a rag and cleaned out all the dust, but also I don't like this bit in here. Now what that is that's the center part, nothing goes in there, but that's the back of the wheel, and inside it's all just sort of dusty alloy. What I'm going to do is spray that inner part black once I've cleaned it out a bit, just so it looks black in there and not all dusty and dirty like that, because once the wheel nuts are in here, that'll kind of cover up most of this dusty sort of bit here that it isn't dusty. You could do with a spray of paint inside each and every one of those holes, to be honest, but this bit I'm going to spray in the back of there, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. Shouldn't take me long. Incidentally, this is the bit I'm talking about in here, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean and then get some black spray paint in there, which should stay there for quite a while because it's pretty well protected from the weather, and then from the outside we won't see all of this, but it does bug me. So yeah, let's clean that and then spray it. Let's get it on the bike and have a look. And so there we are, that is it, all sorted as you can see. And so that is it for today. Hopefully you found this useful, picked up a lot of sort of tips and tricks along the way, but it's all about really taking advantage of the opportunities that come your way to make everything look as best as you can. As always, thanks for watching Dino's Garage.